Tonight, Facebook's free speech reversal.
We've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship.
Why the social media giant says it's returning to its roots of free expression. The 39th President of the United States makes a final return to Washington, D.C. How the nation's capital bids farewell to Jimmy Carter. Plus,
I just wanted to get out in it. I had to go out and get some coffee. I love being out in the snow.
much of America digging out from widespread snow. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Shake up at Meta, Mark Zuckerberg making moves toward greater free speech on Facebook. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation from Washington. I'm John Jessup. Well, big changes at Meta tonight. Facebook and Instagram are ditching their fact-checking program, calling it a win for free speech. The tech giant says it's shifting to a community-based moderation system, sparking fierce debate over whether this protects expression or fuels misinformation. CBN senior Washington correspondent Tara Mergener is here to break down the sweeping changes and what's at stake. Tara.
And John, they are big. The shift comes after years of backlash over content moderation, particularly after the 2016 election. Zuckerberg says the fact checkers were too politically biased and undermined trust in the platform, especially in the U.S.
The bottom line is that after years of having our content moderation work focus primarily on removing content, it is time to focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our systems, and getting back to our roots about giving people voice.
Now, this change is important because it shows a shift in social media, with Meta and X, formerly Twitter, moving to less control over content and more decision-making by users. It's similar to the changes Elon Musk made after buying Twitter. Meta's third-party fact-checking system started after the 2016 election, largely due to political pressure, Zuckerberg says, including from legacy media. Now, this new policy will lift some restrictions on political issues and focus on enforcement of illegal content and serious violations. Meta hopes this will restore trust with users who've complained about censorship and false flags. Now, the move is being praised on the right, with conservative voices who've long criticized social media companies for bias and see the shift as a victory for free speech. President Trump had this today when asked earlier.
I thought it was a very good news conference. I think they've, honestly, I think they've come a long way. Meta, Facebook, I think they've come a long way. I watched it.
Do you think he's directly responding to the threats that you have made to him in the past? With these
Probably,
issues?
yeah, probably.
And critics on social media are responding with concerns that removing the fact checkers could lead to the spread of misinformation and bias. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, among Democrats who previously criticized Zuckerberg for secrecy surrounding the future of the company's content moderation. Now, industry observers say the policy is a clear signal that Meta is moving away from its old model toward a more open approach. Supporters will be watching closely, John, to see how all of this unfolds.
And see how it all plays out in real time. Tara Mergener, thank you so much for joining us. Aaron Turr joins us now. He is the Director of Public Advocacy at FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. Aaron, welcome to you. So I want to start off by getting your initial reaction to this move by Meta. What do you think is driving the change?
Well, the one concern is that it may be, at least partially, in response to actual or anticipated government pressure. I think the most important thing to keep in mind here is that private platforms like Meta have their own First Amendment right to decide what type of content they want to host on their own platforms. And really the worst possible outcome is for the government to use its power to control what speech is hosted on private platforms. But I think if you put aside that possibility of government pressure, there are also good reasons for Meta to independently make these sorts of policy changes. Meta has long called its commitment to free expression paramount. And so by increasing transparency, taking a lighter touch to content moderation, and allowing for fuller discussion of the issues of the day, the platform does take a step in that direction of fulfilling that commitment.
a step in that direction, but do you believe this is the shift actually strikes the right balance between what we were just talking about, promoting free speech, Facebook saying giving people voice, while reducing mistakes and addressing the potential harm caused by misinformation or harmful content on such large platforms?
Yeah, well, we'll see how it actually pans out. But yeah, as you know, Meta has admitted that its content moderation practices haven't been very effective. That they've used these sort of complex automated systems that have consistently restricted content that doesn't even violate the platform's own policies. That it hasn't been easy for users to appeal those decisions, and that has hindered political discussion and debate on the platform. So we'll see if the changes that Meta is planning actually allow for kind of more free and robust discussion on the platform. One thing that they're doing is switching to a community notes model of the type that X uses, and the idea there is that you allow a group of users, a large group of users with diverse perspectives, to flag and rebut potentially false or misleading information, rather than having the platform itself or a third-party organization make top-down decisions about that. So that may be more effective, and it may reduce the bias and arbitrariness of those decisions and foster trust in the platform.
Aaron, how might these changes impact political discourse, especially in a highly polarized setting like ours? Do you think this could increase meaningful dialogue, or might it exacerbate echo chambers and further division?
Well, that's a good question. So the community notes model, for example, might have the effect of reducing polarization if people see it more as a legitimate form of counter speech. That is, we respond to speech that we disagree with more speech by trying to expose and rebut it, rather than having a few people with power at the top decide what's correct, what's incorrect, what's allowed to be said. Maybe that has the potential to sort of, again, increase trust in the platform and in the ability of people to express different views and try to have good faith disagreements.
All right.
I don't think that there's one sort of magic solution to the problems of polarization and echo chambers, but I do think that generally that the solution of restricting speech and trying to limit what people can say is one thing that isn't going to be effective at solving those problems.
Aaron, we're going to have to leave it there. Aaron Turr with FIRE, thank you so much for joining us today and helping break down this new move by Facebook.
Thanks for having me.
Well, from Georgia to Washington, D.C., the farewell to President Jimmy Carter officially reaches the nation's capital. Carter made the final journey today, where he is to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. For the last several days, thousands of mourners paid their respects at the Carter Center in Atlanta, many lining up along highways or roadsides to say goodbye as Carter's motorcade passed through the city.
He was a president and a visionary, and he did so many good things, kept people to vote and, helped everybody.
Today, Carter will receive a state funeral with President-elect Trump attending and President Biden delivering the eulogy. Well, after Winter Storm Blair blanketed much of the country with ice, snow, and wind, the next round of bitter cold is already setting in, reaching southern states and even triggering a freeze warning in Florida. CBN's Michelle London has the latest on the region's biggest snow in more than 5 years.
Here in the downtown area, the roads appear to be clear. Fewer cars out than normal as crews have been working around the clock to clear the snow from the ground. Still, drivers aren't in the clear just yet as the wind and brutally cold temperatures make spotting slippery black ice difficult.
8 states and D.C. declaring a state of emergency. Many federal buildings and public schools closed again Tuesday.
Today we had about 200 people come through the doors, and if you can imagine, if we weren't open, most of those people will probably be out on the streets facing the elements.
Along the Atlantic coast, the Weather Service in Maryland says to expect snow and ice to stick around for the next few days. That means constant refreezing and dangerous driving conditions in some areas. Winter Storm Blair has already claimed at least 9 lives due to traffic accidents across 5 states.
Oh, couldn't be worse.
It's also been a nightmare for travelers. More than 2,300 flights canceled and at least 9,000 delays, according to FlightAware.
Crazy. I've never seen so much snow. I've lived here about all my life.
Here in the nation's capital, Reagan National Airport reopened Tuesday after airport crews spent Monday evening removing snow and using measures to prevent refreezing on the runways. Southern states aren't escaping the wrath, with a cold weather advisory across the Gulf Coast. Wind chill temperatures in Austin, Texas, and surrounding cities dropped as low as 15 degrees. The Lone Star State, as well as Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana, are now bracing for snow. Plunging temperatures left more than 218,000 customers without power Monday night across 7 states. Thousands in Richmond, Virginia, are under a citywide boil alert after a power outage caused a temporary problem with the water system.
And looking to the north, the National Weather Services is already predicting a chance for more lake effect snow, with 75 inches already on the ground in parts of upstate New York. John?
All right, that is Michelle London reporting. Thank you, Michelle. Well, in other news, control over Virginia's state house hinges on 3 special elections tonight. Voters in northern and central Virginia have until 7 p.m. Eastern to choose who will fill vacancies in the Senate and House of Delegates. The elections are seen as an early test of voter enthusiasm after Trump's victory in November and will shed light on the political landscape ahead of Virginia's gubernatorial race and next year's midterm elections. Virginia Democrats are poised to hold on to a state house and Senate seat in Loudoun County, along with their razor-thin majorities in both chambers. Republicans are favored to hold a state Senate seat west of the Capitol in Richmond. Well, with that, let's bring in Julia Manchester. She's a politics reporter at The Hill. Julia, welcome to you and Happy New Year. So Virginia Democrats appear poised to keep control of both the House and the Senate, limiting Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin's legislative agenda to some extent. Virginia, Julia, as you well know, can be seen as a bellwether for the country. So what are you going to be watching for tonight?
Well, look, as we know, those 2 seats in Loudoun County, the House seat and the state Senate seat, are expected to go Democratic, while that seat outside of the Richmond area is expected to lean Republican. But really what we're looking out for is party enthusiasm and voter turnout. Remember, this is the first election since President Trump was elected in November. And we saw that in Virginia, even though the state went blue and Kamala Harris won it, Democratic enthusiasm was a bit depressed. We saw that she won Loudoun County, for example, which should be a shoo-in for Democrats by a smaller margin than what President Biden won it by in 2020. So we'll be looking out for that enthusiasm. But, you know, there is a question as to whether tonight can really be a bellwether going into the state's gubernatorial election. Remember, we're dealing with a winter storm, which could certainly hamper turnout going forward as people try to get to the polls. And it's also an off-year election. People don't, pay as much attention, or voters don't pay as much attention when it comes to these state-level off-year elections versus, let's say, a presidential election.
You know, Virginia employs more federal workers than any other state. Northern Virginia is often seen as home to many D.C. suburbs and exurbs. How might President-elect Trump's plans to trim down the size of the federal workforce or require federal workers to require to the office play in this election?
Well, it's unclear. Democrats seem to be signaling they're going to message on that and essentially try to tie Republicans to DOGE and President Trump's Department of Government Efficiency. Republicans have, sort of brushed that off, saying that, oftentimes it's Republican messaging to cut down the size of government. This is just messaging in a different form, branded as DOGE. They also point out that this is not a federal race. This is a race to, for state government. So there's a number of different factors at play, but I do expect that to be a part of Democratic messaging.
We only have a few seconds left, but I want to ask you about the gubernatorial race later this year. We do know that Virginians are likely going to be deciding on a woman to be the next governor, with an expected race shaping up between Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Sears. A state university poll shows that both of them are tied at 39%. What do you anticipate in this race?
Well, they first have to, clinch their respective nominations. They are definitely on their way to doing that. They are seeing in many ways as their party's respective, likely nominees. But look, it's going to be close. We could see, I'm curious to see how the Trump administration impacts this race. We've seen past Virginia races, like in 2017 and 2019, when Democrats, have really benefited from Trump being in office at that time. But when Trump wasn't in in office. We've seen Republicans, like in 2021, do much better in the state. So that's going to be a factor. But regardless, history will be made. There has never been a woman governor of Virginia. So assuming these two get their nominations, we'll see the first woman governor of Virginia. And if Winsome Sears wins, she will become the first Black female governor.
It feels like we're witnessing a lot of history these days. Julia Manchester, always good to have you on.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, the latest on Israel's efforts to hunt down terrorists and bring the hostages back home. Welcome back. Israel is ramping up counterterrorism operations in the West Bank, also known as Biblical Judea and Samaria. Overnight, Israeli forces killed 3 Palestinians identified as militants by the IDF. Israel says the raids aren't connected to Monday's deadly terror attack when a gunman opened fire on a bus, killing 3 Israelis. The military is still searching for the perpetrator.
We are engaged in intense and wide-ranging combat against terrorism in Judea and Samaria. We will intensify and continue this combat. For the terrorists who carried out this attack, the clock is ticking back. We will find out who perpetrated this attack and reach them. We will act swiftly to bypass the town on this route and make the route safer.
Meanwhile, a new threat from Iran, the Islamic Republic holding an air defense drill near its Natanz nuclear plant. Experts say the exercise is meant to demonstrate Iran's air defense is still operational following an Israeli attack last October. Iran is warning Israel if it attacks again, it will result in a large-scale war. Well, up next, couples struggling with infertility find a new path. See the alternative to IVF that's changing lives. Welcome back. About 10% of couples nationwide struggle with infertility. Instead of turning to in vitro fertilization, some are taking a different approach. As CBN Health reporter Lori Johnson explains, restorative reproductive medicine is an alternative that focuses on the underlying causes of the problem.
After 9 years of marriage, Karen and Anthony Minetti felt the Lord leading them to have a baby.
Put it in God's hand.
Put it in God's hands and let it go. And we got pregnant pretty fast.
Unfortunately, the couple experienced a miscarriage and 3 more after that.
Nothing has hurt, and I've never grieved so much as infertility journey. But one thing I want to say is there's hope.
Karen, then age 41, and Anthony consulted their doctor, who recommended in vitro fertilization.
My hematologist said, I really want you to go through IVF. You're older. You don't want to run the risk of any genetic defects. And my husband and I flat out said, we're not doing it. This is all in God's hands. He will take care of us.
The primary reason the couple decided against IVF is because the procedure often involves creating embryos that go unused.
So I didn't want to have multiple eggs that were conceived just sitting there frozen. I could not bring myself to that, knowing that there was life there that was not inside of me and I was not birthing.
Instead, Karen and Anthony sought an IVF alternative.
Restorative reproductive medicine, or RRM, is a natural, holistic approach to infertility. Instead of performing a procedure that goes around the problem, RRM doctors seek to find the root cause, then fix that.
Karen and Anthony visited the clinic run by doctors Edward Fleming and Jean Golden-Tevald.
The amazing thing is in 20 years of doing this, I have never had a woman who we evaluated that we came up and said, we can't find anything wrong. There's always something.
The process begins with a detailed examination of the woman's ovulation cycle and hormones.
So right off the bat, it was a lot of testing. So Dr. Eddie and Dr. Jean from the practice both had me go through a lot of blood work.
They test the guys, too.
Men with low testosterone, men who are having, which can affect like male function, but also affect sperm counts.
Turns out Karen dealt with blood clots and hormone issues.
And it's almost always never just one thing. There's usually multiple factors.
After taking a blood thinner, hormones, and more, the Minettis had their prayers answered.
My pregnancy was a huge success. We finally have our baby, our miracle.
Doctors say RRM's success rate is equal to or better than IVF.
The other piece is that there's really no risk, and it's really inexpensive too.
Karen and Anthony wish more doctors would recommend this option.
I don't think many people know it exists. I think RRM is not talked about in the mainstream medical practices. I think, again, it's just go to IVF, go to IVF.
Fortunately, RRM is not very well known. And I think a big reason for that is because it's not advertised as much in a mainstream sort of way. There's not a lot of money to be gained in RRM.
Some members of Congress are trying to expand access through legislation. Senator James Lankford recently sponsored the Restore Act, saying it prioritizes addressing underlying causes of infertility to help families bring the miracle of life into the world. The new Senate is expected to resume consideration. In the meantime, advocates rely on word of mouth.
I recommend everybody I know who struggles with fertility that has told me. I've given out Dr. Eddie and Dr. Jean's information because again, God gave them to us and they are incredible, and we have our miracle baby now.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Still ahead, what some are calling a post-holiday miracle. Next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, a precious reunion for a woman in Long Island, New York, all thanks to the kindness of strangers and a helpful airline. Diana Friedman lost her necklace while traveling over the holidays, but it wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It belonged to her grandmother and had been a family heirloom for a century. When she realized it went missing, she asked the airline she was flying for help. The JetBlue team responded and got to work and found her necklace within 48 hours.
It was happy tears for a long time after that, and I still feel it right now. I feel so lucky and so blessed.
The JetBlue team says it was amazing to be a part of what they call a holiday miracle. Well, great to see her reunited there. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow. Good night.